What's going on, college football fans, and welcome back to the First and Long College Football Show. If this is your first time tuning in the First and Long College Football Show, welcome. We are counting down our, I'd say, our most intriguing 35 teams in the country from wall to wall Power Four conferences. And today we're going to be talking about number 10 on our list, the Michigan Wolverines. So, Michigan fans, welcome. We hope that you'll consider hitting the subscribe button. Um, we're well aware that there's tons of media out there that covers Michigan football and a lot of good reporting that goes on. What we do is a little bit different here at the First and Long College Football Show. We're a Power Four college football show. We're talking the grand scheme of things, right? And we want you to come join us. We'd love to have your perspective to be part of our show and our community that we're building here. Um, I'm Marcus. This is Mason. Mason, how are you today? You ready to talk some Michigan football, man?
Yeah, man, let's get into it. We've got a really interesting team, I think, this year for Michigan. Obviously, coming off the national championship last year, the only team to win 15 games last year, the only team to go undefeated in the Power Four. So, an amazing year last year. You expect a lot of attrition after, years like that. But we did see Georgia win a national championship, lose a ton of players in 2021, and then in 2022 turn around and repeat. So it's been done in recent years. I'm curious to see kind of what your thoughts are on this team. I think defensively, look, they're just not losing a ton. They're losing a lot of top end talent, and we'll get into the names here in just a bit. But I think that the structure of this Michigan defense, which was so good last year, is coming back. You're getting a lot of that returning talent back. I'm anxious to see. I think you can look at the offense and say, okay, one starter returning, right? Well, that may be true, but what they're going to bring in at quarterback, potentially with Alex Orji starting, I think it's going to be a different looking offense, and that could work in Michigan's benefit because transitioning to a different style of offense with all these new players may actually turn out to be more beneficial than less. But let's get into it. Let's start on the offensive side of the football.
Yeah. Let's jump into it and just kind of put a cap on what you just said. It was a 25-year drought, right, for winning a title at Michigan, and finally bust through. And as soon as you do this team was kind of like an NFL team in one way. When you win a championship in the NFL, it's nearly impossible to hold that team together. Everybody wants a piece of that team. Everybody wants the coach. Everybody wants the quarterback. Everybody wants blah, 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 blah. We see it time and time again, year in, year out, throughout a lot of professional sports. This is a little different in being a college football team. You just had a ton of guys age out or go to the NFL. It really is an entirely new offense. It's an entirely new head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. A lot of change, but I think Sharon Moore is doing a pretty good job of trying to keep the main thing, and that's just keeping this standard that has been established over the last few years. I mean, gosh, Mason, the way things have evolved there in Ann Arbor over the last few years, there was a point where people wanted Jim Harbaugh fired, and then he finally gets his system and his culture in place, and it turned out to bring a championship to Ann Arbor last year. So, as you said, let's kind of jump into the offense here, and let's look. There's only one starter coming back, as you can see there on your screen. Colston Loveland is the only guy from that team last year. You see everybody there on your screen. The only starter that's coming back. Now, he's not the only one with returning production that's coming back, and so we're going to get into some of those guys. But Mason, this is for all intents and purposes, an entirely new offense. Now, whenever I said earlier that your offensive coordinator, changed, your offensive coordinator became your head coach. So that's a little bit different than your average, team just losing an offensive coordinator altogether. So I, the terminology should all be the same. I feel like I feel like this team is going to do a lot of the same things that they did last year, Mason. Now you don't have that the one really awesome running back, right, that you had, but you do have somebody coming back and Donovan Edwards there in that running back room. But let's talk about some of these portal additions because Mason, these are important. Not a ton of portal additions for this team, but all three of them look like they're going to be contributors on the offense, if not starters on this offense. Um, let's just kind of we'll come back to this list here in a second. Let's start with quarterback. You mentioned the quarterback battle, Mason, and I've heard I have now heard mixed things. I've listened to several different shows. Just listened to a guy a few minutes ago. Um, he's saying that he thinks Jack Tuttle will be the starter to start the year,
Hmm.
and that does make a lot of sense to me, Mason. The more I listen to this guy talk, the more it made sense to me. Obviously, I think the upside is going to be higher with Alex Orji, but from what I'm understanding, he's very turnover prone, and they're saying on in these 7-on-7s, and he's turning the ball over a ton. Um, so I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Jack Tuttle actually come out and start the season. That's just my opinion. Look, guys, this information hasn't been released. Okay, we don't a starter hasn't been named. So all we have to go on here is speculation and what we're hearing, from the insiders and things like that. Um, do I think Alex Orji will be the starter before the end of the year? Yes. Maybe those first couple of games, I could see Jack Tuttle getting started, and then bringing Alex Orji in with packages or alternating series or something of that nature. I think this will be a team to start the year that will have two quarterbacks rather than one. What are your thoughts on that? Jack Tuttle's got a ton of experience. He's from the Kalen DeBoer tree. Actually, was enrolled at Utah at one point. Never played, and then made his way to Indiana. Was there long time ago. Whenever Coach DeBoer was there, was a backup for Michael Penix over there, and then made his way over to Michigan. Um, okay numbers, not great. Uh, this guy was a four-star recruit at one point. What's your thoughts on this quarterback battle? I know you're kind of leaning Orgy, and I am too. I lean to his upside, but this is just what I've heard. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of news to me. Everything, and not saying you're wrong. Everything that I've heard at this point has kind of leaned towards Alex Orji starting. I think you know obviously we're not going to have that answer. I don't think that Sharon Moore has that answer right now.
Right.
But you know if you look at the two different play styles of these quarterbacks, you're going to be run heavy with Alex Orji to prevent those turnovers that you mentioned, and you're going to be able to pass the ball more effectively with Jack Tuttle. I think that ultimately, what I think that what's going to decide the quarterback position more so than the quarterbacks themselves is the wide receiver play. What do you have on the edge, right? Do we want to be passing the football a ton, or do we want to be run heavy? Michigan's always kind of, well, I don't want to say always, but the past couple of years they've been very balanced with a little bit more of a run heavy centric offense. So maybe Alex Orji makes sense if you're going to run the football, and you want to run the football with him as well. But it all depends on what Sharon Moore wants to do with the offense. And I think that if I'm looking at my offense, I want to know what all the pieces are, not just at quarterback, so that I get the most out of my playmakers. If you're wanting to run the football with Alex Orji, maybe him running the football is maybe he's your best playmaker, right? Maybe that's the most effective strategy is to have him run the football, with Donovan Edwards and Khalil Mullings kind of backing him up as well. Or, if your best playmaker is at wide receiver or if it's Colston Loveland, then maybe you want to be more pass heavy and go with a guy like Jack Tuttle. But I mean, it sounds like based on that competition, what you're saying, maybe we do see Jack Tuttle start the season, kind of you know, get grounded. They do have Texas in week 2,
Yeah.
but maybe you see Alex Orji, kind of coming in some packages. I could definitely see it being a 2 quarterback system early on. Give Tuttle a chance to win the job, give Orgy a chance to win the job, be fair. Tuttle's a 7th year guy, give him his opportunity, right? Um, but yeah, I think you'll probably end up seeing both quarterbacks now this season at some point.
The number one thing that if I'm a Michigan fan, and I'm not, you can see I got my Georgia Bulldogs gear on here. But we try to give you just a fair shake at this and tell you how we feel about it. But if I'm a Michigan fan or a fan of any football team, I don't want to see Alex Orgy come in obvious running situations. That's where these two quarterback systems I feel like kind of fail their team. I've seen guys come in and say, "All right, when we bring this guy in." Oh, we saw it at Georgia with Justin Fields when Justin Fields was at Georgia. When he came in, it seemed really obvious what was about to happen, right? And I don't want to see that with Alex Orgy. You have to be able to have some kind of threat throwing the football. And I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm just saying defenses have to fear it. And they have to respect it. Otherwise, the running game's not going to work, and vice versa. You know what I'm saying? So, um, Alex Orgy has got to develop himself as an adequate passer for this offense. Maybe he's done that some more over the offseason or in between spring and fall. I think that's very possible. But from everything that I've heard, that is the part of his game that is lacking is certainly not athleticism. It's not as a thrower, it's as a passer. There's a difference between being a thrower and being a passer. And it sounds like he needs to develop more to become the passer that this team needs, or would like. I guess it's not even fair to say they need it, right, Mason? There was games last year where it was like, all right, I don't even think this team needs to throw the football at all. So, um,
Yeah.
with that being said, let's talk about this run game, and let's go into the running back room. You've got Donovan Edwards headed back. Um, last season left a little bit to be desired, right? He had a 2022 campaign that was just absolutely stellar. Um, you know, what 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 do you think? What do you take away from it? 7.1 yards per carry and 7 scores in 2022, and then in 2023, just 4.2 yards per carry and 5 touchdowns. Those numbers are down um, pretty seriously in what I thought was probably one of the best offensive lines that Michigan's probably ever had. Right?
Hmm.
What do you make of that? He sure did look good in the spring game. I went back and watched the spring game, and Donovan Edwards looked super explosive, running very hard. Looked like he was having fun out there to me. Um,
Yeah.
he looked really, really good. What do you make of that? And what do you make of this running back room? Um, I, I I think it's pretty good, but I think it's a step back from last year, and uh, I don't think that's a hot take. Just a little bit of a step back. I mean, you can't lose a guy like Blake Corum and say you took a step up, right?
Potentially. I think you have a little bit of a different dynamic at running back where Kalel Mullings is sort of that power back where I don't feel like they had that last year. I know he was a part of the team last year, but seemed like he was underutilized. I think if you get him more involved on third down and just on first down, right? Give him a series or something. I think you could have something special in Kalel Millings. And with Donovan Edwards, what's going to be interesting, you're right. He played much better in 2022, got more opportunities in 2022 than 23. But Donovan Edwards came in wanting to get more explosive this year, so he dropped a few pounds. I'm anxious to see what sort of effect that has. He looked good in the spring game, but maybe he's the kind of guy that you got to get 15 carries in a game before he really gets going. Maybe 10 carries before he gets going. And I think as he builds that confidence up, we're going to see him back to that 2022 form. I don't think that 7.1 yards per carry is realistic, but can we get over 5? Right, that's kind
Mhm.
of where he needs to be if he's gonna if they're gonna feed him 15 20 carries a game, he needs to be up over 5 yards per carry. And I think he's well. he's definitely talented enough to do it. Let's see if that explosiveness sort of comes back as he's shed some pounds here. And then, but Kalel Mullings is a guy that I'm definitely very high on. I think that you could see a scenario if Edwards isn't able to get back into that 2022 form. You could see a scenario where towards the end of the year, Mullings is kind of your starter, getting the bulk of the carries, and then Edwards is sort of backing him up again.
Yeah, and you got signee Amarian Stewart. He arrives on campus, 4-star guy. Um, good hands on him. He could be a household name by the season's end. Tyler Morris and Frederick Moore are both flashing in spring ball. Or excuse me, that's at wide receiver. I'm sorry. I'm reading my notes here. So you had talked about the running back losing a few pounds there, Edwards. That's always a good thing, right? Benjamin Hall is going to be a guy that's coming in and affecting. Jordan Marshall going to be a guy. He arrives and he'll throw himself into the mix. So you've got some options there. I still say this running back room. I can't. I got to see it first. I got to see it before I'm going to say it's better than last year. Blake Corum just had an unbelievable season last year, and with all that being said as well, the offensive line is not going to be as good. There's no way. The offensive line has typically been a strength for this team, but there's certainly some questions this year, right? There's got to be 4 or 5 starters are gone. Your left tackle Miles Hinton is the only one that's going to be able to come back with any experience. You went in the transfer portal. You got right guard Josh Preby from Northwestern, as we saw in one of our previous slides there. You got a lot of development that's got to happen here, Mason. Your head coach was your offensive line coach. You would expect this team to be able to feed off of his energy, and you would expect this team to have a good offensive line. I said the same thing about Sam Pittman at Arkansas. I said, well, Arkansas will always have good offensive lines. That wasn't the case last year, right? So it doesn't always translate. And I'm not comparing the two, but that's one example, right? What do you think about this offensive line? 4 out of 5 starters gone. Are they going to take a step in the right direction or the wrong direction here, Mason?
Well, I mean, we can't have the answers today on whether or not this is going to be a successful offensive line. We haven't seen enough, right? In-game production is just not there. I feel pretty confident in Miles Hinton. I think that he's a senior guy and it's going to get his shot. I think they're pretty set at left tackle. And from what I'm hearing, Greg Crippen is looking good at center. But there's just a lot of hearsay. And what I'm hearing from the Michigan folks is we trust in Sharon Moore. We trust in Michigan. We've always got good offensive line play, and we don't expect it to be any different. Sure. I mean, sure. I don't know. I don't know what to take from that because nobody's given any definitive answers on why this offensive line should be good. And so I've drawn the conclusion that we don't know. We don't know, and we're just going to have to wait and see what happens because, I mean, basically you're getting a whole new offensive line. That's almost never good. Like it never goes the right way.
Yeah, we can only read the tea leaves here, and tea leaves are telling me 4 out of 5 starters gone is not going to help. If this team isn't solid on that front line, it's going to be really hard to implement their game plan. And,
Yeah.
you know, we'll just have to see. You're right. I mean, we just don't know. Let's talk about those wide receivers for a minute. You got a guy like Tyler Morris. That could be a guy that really kind of plays second fiddle to Samaj Morgan, right? So I feel like you got a good 1-2 punch there. Frederick Moore listed as the starter there. I mean, he has 4 receptions and 32 yards in his whole career. So I feel like that's fluid, right? I mean, you got a Marion Walker. He was originally a defensive back at Michigan, transfers out to Ole Miss, is going to play wide receiver, transfers back after the spring. So now he's back at Michigan, and he's going to be playing wide receiver. So you got a guy that's a converted DB back and forth, if you can make sense out of what I just said. Um, and you've got C.J. Charleston, the transfer from Youngstown State, 33 receptions, 503 yards. I mean, you'll just kind of have to wait and see how a guy from Youngstown State is going to, translate over to Division One, not only Division One but Big Ten football. Um, what do you make of this room? I see some viable options. I know there, I know there's probably some young guys coming in, not guys that necessarily ring a bell or really get you crazy excited. I don't feel like. What do you think about this wide receiver room, Mason?
Well, a lot more questions than answers. I think it's kind of been a trend for this offensive side of the football, at least. Um, I really like Samaj Morgan. I think that he's probably going to be your wide receiver one, kind of coming out of the slot here. You know, Frederick Moore, kind of flashed in spring ball. Tyler Morris, the same. We're gonna have to wait and see. I think Morris is kind of that, that downfield threat, can kind of take the top off the defense, but we'll have to wait and see. We haven't seen Amarion Walker on this side of the football. Maybe there's a reason that he is moving over to receiver. Maybe they saw some things that they really liked out of him. But the biggest question mark is who's going to get them the football, right? Until we know that, I don't know if we can necessarily grade this receiver room, and know whether or not they're going to be truly productive. But there is one freshman I am interested in, and that's Marion Stewart, 4-star guy coming over. Between him and Samaj Morgan, you've got two former 4-star guys, higher end, top 150 overall recruits at receiver. So I think bringing him in to the fold in a Michigan offense that hasn't always featured the wide receiver, he's got to be promised some snaps. He's got to be promised some opportunities to make some plays, and I think that he's the type of guy that can also take the top off of a defense. If they've got a quarterback that can get him the football, he could be a 5, 6, 700-yard guy as a true freshman, which would be pretty eye-popping, and become one of the better receivers, I guess, in the Big Ten. So I think that, he shows some promise, but ultimately this group is unproven, I would say.
Yeah. Well, you do have one guy that is coming back from the starting offense last year, and we talked about it earlier, Colston Loveland. He's not a wide receiver; he's a tight end, but a pass catcher nonetheless. And this new offensive coordinator, Campbell, he knows Loveland's got to be part of this offense. He's one of the best tight ends in America. Averaged nearly 14 yards a catch. You got to get this guy involved with this inexperience that we see at the wide receiver room, tight end. Hopefully, the offensive line is going to be solid enough where Colston Loveland is able to get out route, right, and get out and catch some passes, especially in short yardage and red zone situations. I think that would be a big help. Um, is tight end a strength for this offense? I guess you'd have to consider it to be a strength, considering it's one of the only known elements of this offense.
Yeah, I think so. I'm kind of interested to see who they have as a playmaker behind Colston Loveland. He's got the yards, the talent. Had 649 yards, 4 touchdowns last year, 31 first down catches, and a 72.5% catch win rate. I mean, that's pretty dang productive. Might be the best tight end in the country, when it's all said and done this year. And then opposite of him, when they run the 2 tight end set, they've got Marlon Klein, who's sort of that blocking threat, right? He's your 6th offensive lineman. Might see a lot of that this year. A lot of 2 tight end sets, especially with a new offensive line. Why not just add a 6th offensive lineman and give them some help?
Yeah.
could see a lot of that coming this year. One guy that I've circled though as a potential kind of breakout tight end is the freshman Brady Prescorn. Might recognize that last name. Prescorn
Yeah.
is the tight end over at Ole Miss. His first name's Caden, Caden Prescorn. He's the younger brother. Brady is the younger brother of Caden Prescorn. So if we get, if Michigan's got Caden Prescorn 2.0, then that's going to be pretty promising as a pass catcher. So maybe we see a little bit of him. But Colston Loveland's got to be your playmaker on offense. Got to find a way to get him the football this year.
Yeah, Mason, I just look, and we're doing this show. We have to make predictions. At some point we've got to say this is what we think is going to happen. And overall, you look at this offense, I don't think you can sit here and honestly say to yourself that you think it's going to be better than last year. Does that mean this is going to be a bad offense? No, that does not mean that. I don't think this is going to be a bad offense. I think this is going to be a run heavy offense, right? That tries to control the clock. Michigan is a certain style of football, and that's not going to change. I don't think that's going to change this year. They're not about to air it out. You know what I'm saying? Like we're going to see more of the same. It's the same recipe, and this offense is going to rely on this defense, right? That's what it is. Complementary football in Ann Arbor, and it won a national championship last year. Who's to say that it couldn't be successful this year? I don't think they're winning the national championship, but the goals are still the same. Coach said it himself there at spring. The goals haven't changed. Let's talk about that defense because this has got to be, um, this is how they butter their bread there in Ann Arbor, and that's not going to change, right? You got returners. Ernest Hausman coming back at outside linebacker. That's going to be a strength. I guess kind of like an edge guy there. Just Josiah Stewart, 38 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. You got nose tackle Mason Graham coming back. The defensive line should be pretty doggone good this year. We'll get into that in a second. Cornerback Will Johnson is coming back. And then you've got, again, I'm going to say the same thing about defense that I said about offense. Pay attention to the portal additions for a Michigan football team. They're not taking guys just to sit around. If they're taking guys in the portal, they're more than likely going to play right away, right? They're going to contribute. I don't think that's anything different on this defense, even though you do have a 54% returning production, which is a whole lot better than what you had on offense. What do you think about the guys that they've acquired through the portal additions? And then if you'd like, you could take us into defensive line, Mason.
Yeah, I do like what they did in the transfer portal. Getting Jay Sean Barham. He's a guy who I really like coming out of Maryland. And Amir Hall, you can see his numbers there at cornerback coming over from Albany. Really productive. 13 pass breakups is extremely productive there. Interested to see, if he actually ends up starting. It sounds like there's a redshirt freshman who's maybe making some noise in spring ball and could have kind of stole that position out from under him. And then Ricky Johnson coming over, not really sure if UNLV coming over from UNLV is going to translate, which, you could say the same about Amir Hall, but productive numbers there. He's going to take a step up in competition in coming to the Big Ten. And then someone who's got some Big Ten experience is Jaden Mangum, who, has been productive with Michigan State. And I don't have any reason to believe that he's not going to be your starter at safety, even over a program guy like Quentin Johnson. I really like what they've done, with this transfer portal class on the defensive side of the football. They bring back a lot of talent, but they add in a handful of pieces that could really help with the depth here on this defense side of the football. It's going to be a really strong defense this year, once again, for Michigan. But looking at the defensive line, I mean, what's not to like, right? this is a defense that typically plays, 3 down linemen with a couple of outside linebackers playing on, either side of the line. But Kenneth Grant is a guy who probably gets a little bit overlooked on this defensive line, with Mason Graham getting a lot of that attention. But Kenneth Grant at 6'3", 340 pounds, had 29 tackles last year, which is a lot for a nose tackle. 5 tackles for a loss, 3 sacks, and then had 5 pass breakups as well, which is kind of interesting. He's getting those big paws up, right? 15 quarterback hurries, 14 run stops, and a 10% pass rush win rate. Anytime you're getting to 10%, I mean that's a lot, but at 340 pounds, that's a hell of a lot. To be a good pass rusher. We know how he plays in the run game. We know that he can take on 2 blocks as a nose tackle, but he's also getting good pass rush. It's really he's really a pretty remarkable athlete there as a junior. And then Mason Graham, I mean, probably the best defensive tackle in the country. 36 tackles last year, 7.5 tackles for a loss, 3 sacks, 18 quarterback hurries, 22 run stops. There's so much to like about this guy. Nothing to dislike. He's a havoc wreaker. He's disruptive. It seems like every snap he's in the backfield doing something, pushing that center back, pushing that guard back, and just making the quarterback dish out of the pocket. And I think he's a special player. And one of the best players on this team, if not the best. And this is one of probably 3 positions on this team where Michigan's got the best player in the country potentially. So, but Mason Graham's the best of the best. I think he's a future first-round pick. Really like the defensive line. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's also strength on the outside, and your edge rushers, Derek Moore, 34 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. Josiah Stewart, 38 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. So you return a lot of production there on the edges. Rayshon Benny and TJ Guy, they showed up during spring camp, and they're worthy of playing time too, and they should be on the field, rotating in and out. So all in all, I mean, you spoke about the guys on the inside there, Graham and Grant. Um, this is a really, really good looking. Really, ones and twos look pretty good for as far as the edges go, and then the defensive line guys. You got those 2 awesome dudes there in the middle. They're going to help free up this linebacker room, Mason, to make all their plays that they need to make. And I know a guy like Ernest Hausman and Jay Sean Barham. They're going to be very excited to have those big guys up in front of them, keeping paws off of them and allowing them to react to the backfield and coverages and things like that. I think this is probably the best position group on this team.
Yeah.
Don't you? I just
Yeah.
think it's not
I
even
mean,
close, really.
when you do these breakdowns, you look at the amount of sacks, and no one player is getting double-digit sacks, right? It's 3 here, 3 there, 5.5 here, 6 there. It's really spread out, and I mean it's just a balanced team that does a good job at creating havoc. But I'm anxious to see what, since you brought up the outside linebackers, what Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore are able to do. I think one of these guys probably does get close to that 10 sack mark. Both of them are extremely talented and have great numbers overall. I feel like you can't go wrong on either side there. And I think you're completely right. They're gonna open up some things for this linebacking core and really kind of set them up in a good way.
Opponent scored an average of 10.4 points per game last year, Mason. That is unbelievable. It was one of the best defenses we've seen since that 21, I think, Georgia defense, right? I would put those 2 defenses kind of above all else in recent history. Really, really, really good defense nonetheless. And I think it's going to continue. I think to beat this team, you're going to have to figure out a way to score on this defense. And oh, by the way, I forget what their turnover margin what last year was, but it was way in the positives, right?
Yeah,
Um, and,
17
and
picks last year.
yeah, and I believe they were like plus 16 overall in differential. You can let me know in the comment section. I know you Michigan fanatics are going to know that stat by heart from last year, right? Special season, you're going to remember lots of little things about it, and I'm super happy for you guys. Um, let's round out that linebacker room. Let's talk about middle linebacker and then that weak side linebacker. You got Ernest Hausman. He's a veteran weak side linebacker, and um, he's the returning tackler from last season, right? 46 stops, and as you said, Mason, everybody kind of shares the load on this team, man. It's everybody is active and getting tackles. So your leading tackler from a national championship team, 46 stops. That's pretty incredible. Um, he's active and he'll pop you, man. Got a nose for the football. You got other guys that came through the portal. Jay Barham comes over from Maryland. He's going to have one more season there in Ann Arbor. He had 37 tackles last season in 11 games. He's been a starter since his freshman season. So there's some depth with Jaden Hood and Jimmy Rolder. So all in all, and we already talked about the edge guys there. Um, all in all, middle linebacker, weak side linebacker. I like the starters. I'm interested to see, kind of what the depth looks like. God forbid you get injuries. That happens. This is a physical football game and a physical style that Michigan plays here. Gonna need somebody else to be waiting in the wings with these guys, right? And I know I mentioned Jaden Hood and Jimmy Rolder. Um, we'll see how they do filling in, but going from ones to twos, I feel like there's a little more drop off probably than last year. But all in all, I still think it's a really good linebacker core. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, if you're looking at just the inside linebackers, take the outside linebackers out of this for now. It's probably the weakest unit, right, as far as the depth goes. Really like what they have in Ernest Hausman. Important to note, he had the most tackles for a returning defender. So he was third on the team with 46,
Okay,
but
gotcha.
Junior Colson had 95 last year, which is a ton. That's a lot of production to replace. And then also at the linebacker position, Michael Barrett, who had 65. So what you're really replacing is 65 tackles at that Mike linebacker position, which is where they bring in Jay Barham, coming over from Maryland, had 37 tackles, 3 tackles for a loss, 3 sacks, 18 run stops, 15 quarterback hurries, 22% pass rush win rate. Really high in the pass rush, right? For a middle linebacker, I mean that's pretty productive. When he blitzes, he's getting to the quarterback 22% of the time on a passing situation. So, you know, I like what they brought in. I like that they add him to this group. Interested to see if one of those other two younger guys in I say younger, they're all juniors, but Jimmy Rolder or Jaden Hood. Interested to see if one of them step up and kind of claim their position at Mike linebacker. But you're pretty shored up with Ernest Hausman, and we just got to figure out if that Mike linebacker position is going to be as effective as the weak side. But yeah, definitely the weakest unit um, on this defense. But the good thing is it's only 2 positions out of
Mm,
11. So
yeah, I think they're gonna be. I think they're gonna be all right. To say that one unit is the weakest on this defense, then that doesn't necessarily mean, there's other teams that would kill to have the linebacker room, right? That Michigan has. So, um, it should be pretty good. Let's talk about the secondary for a minute, and then we're going to look at the 2024 schedule and make our predictions for the season, Mason. You had an injury to the standout safety Rod Moore, and that kind of muddied up the picture a little bit in terms of secondary depth. But I mean, let's don't make any mistakes about it. This is definitely one of the deepest pass defending groups, one of the best pass defending groups probably in the country, Mason. And they're going to need it this season as the Big Ten. I feel like as increased. I feel like the talent level and the ceiling level has increased as far as passing games in the Big Ten as you add some of these West Coast teams to the mix. We'll get to the schedule here in a few minutes, but um, that secondary, it starts with Will Johnson, 6'2", 202 pounds. Um, this guy is not afraid to tackle people. He can play press coverage. He had 27 stops last year. Broke up 4 passes and picked off 4 more. This guy, 78.5 coverage grade, was among the best in the Big Ten in 2023. You got Jair Hill, Jacob Oden, Miles Pollard. It, all these guys are battling out on that opposite side of Will Johnson there. You got Zeke Berry in the nickel position. It really is honestly just kind of rinse and repeat here, right? You just you out with the old, in with the new. Yeah, obviously you got some guys coming back, but these aren't all new guys. But you get my point. Rinse, lather, repeat, brother. Going to be a really good secondary again. You got Makari Page. That's somebody you need to know at safety. He had made 41 stops a year ago. You got Wesley Walker, who transferred over from Tennessee. That was probably their best safety. Really hurt Tennessee, by the way. That really hurt that secondary for them. You got Quentin Johnson. You just got tons of guys. What do you think about it? This is probably second best group on the defense behind the defensive line. I would say that this is just as good as last year, if not better, in the secondary. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is the area that saw the most transfers come in on this defense, and probably didn't really need it. To be honest, when you look at the starters, you know, a lot of these transfer players, I think, came over intending to start, and they're going to end up playing backup to some of the talent that was already on the team. Um, I'm hearing that Jair Hill is going to end up being your left cornerback after he kind of shooed DJ Waller out, you know, forced him to transfer out, and that's a redshirt freshman that I think Amir Hall is probably expecting to come in and start over. And is it really getting that opportunity? I think Jair's being a little stingy over there at the cornerback position, and good for him. Makari Page, really like what this guy brings at 6'4", 210 pounds at the safety position. He plays the run well, plays the pass well, had a couple of pass breakups. Only 57% completion when targeted. That's getting it done at the safety position. And at that size, like I said, he's coming downhill and playing the run really well. Another guy with some size, and you're seeing this a lot on this back end in the secondary. But at 6'2", 200 pounds, you've got your free safety transfer coming in from Michigan State, Jaden Mangum. I think he's going to end up being the starter over Quentin Johnson, who, you know, Johnson's a 5th or 6th year guy at seniors, been there a long time. I think he will get a lot of opportunities, but at the end, I think that Mangum's probably the more talented out of the two, and you'll see him end up being the starter. He had the best run stop grade for free safety per Pro Football Focus. So best run grade for any safety, and that's saying something. Coming over from Michigan State, playing in, you know, the Big Ten, had 53 tackles last year, 3 pass breakups, 4 interceptions. Just a ball hawk, you know, just has a nose for the football. So I really like the transfer piece that Michigan was able to add there. And then Will Johnson, who's again one of those 3 that might be the best at his position, probably the best cornerback in the country, but more size, 6'2", 200 pounds, a lot of length on this defense. Another 4 interceptions, 4 pass breakups for him. You know, 44% completed when targeted. He was only targeted 38 times last year. Nobody wants to throw at that guy. Really excited for this group. I think Nickelback may be the only one that I have questions on. I don't know a ton about the Nickelback position. Jaden McBurrows is gonna end up being your starter there. It looks like Zeke Berry coming in, playing some in a backup role, but this is a solid unit. 4 out of 5 are 100%. You know, I think going to be really solid for this team. Yeah, you could argue that this is the best unit on the field, honestly, in comparison to the defensive line.
We need to take some unders, is what you're saying. We
Yes.
we need to be hitting the under button on Michigan as we are betting on our college football games. And I want to take this moment. We're about to jump into the 2024 schedule. I want to invite all of you Michigan fans to come hang out with us throughout the season. Speaking of betting, if I don't know what you guys, we love to bet on the games, and we have a really good time with it. We have a betting show that we do usually. Last year it was every Friday morning that we would release that. I believe maybe it was Thursday night, but we're going to revamp all that stuff. We're going to bring that show back. I'm not sure what day it'll be on yet. You need to hit subscribe, and we'll make all those announcements on our channel. We have a really good time, and we'd love to hear what you guys are betting on. We have a really good time and talk about you guys on the show and what you're betting on. And we had a Georgia Bulldogs fan, got on a roll last year betting. Was he betting overs or unders, Mason? It was really phenomenal. Every week, I think it was unders. And every week he'd come on and pick an under of the week, right? And he hit it damn near every week. And me and Mason just kind of watched and marveled as he made money. So come and join us. We have a really, really good time. We'd love to have you. Let's go in this 2024 schedule. It looks a lot different than anything we've seen out of a Michigan schedule in a long time, Mason. My biggest complaint with Michigan was playing all non-Power 5, right? Previously Power 5, now it's Power 4, but non-power conference, non-conference opponents. That was driving me crazy. It was years. It's been years since Michigan has played a regular season non-conference power conference team. And you don't have to wait long into the schedule to see it, my friend. Texas. You got Texas coming into town. What a showdown that one's going to be, man. That is going to be a awesome game, an awesome scene there in Ann Arbor. Sometimes I've heard people talk about the Michigan crowd as a wine and cheese crowd, right? Not that day. It won't be that day. They're going to be absolutely ready. More than likely, going to be a beautiful day there in September to have some football against two of the big premier programs in college football. I can't wait to see that one. You got USC there September 21st after an Arkansas State victory that you will get. Minnesota September 28th, October 5th. You got to go to Washington. That'll be interesting. Now being obviously a conference game there. October 19th, you'll have a week off after Washington, by the way. So that's nice after the travels, right? October 19th at Illinois. October 26th, Michigan State. November 2nd, Oregon. You get to host Oregon and Texas. If you're a season ticket holder for Michigan this year, you just got it going on, man. You're getting to see some daggum good football games. That November 2nd showdown is going to be pivotal as far as the Big Ten's conference, rankings and ratings and all that are concerned. Everybody's going to be paying attention to that game. Whoever wins that game is probably going to have a pretty clear shot at the Big Ten championship game there. November 9th at Indiana, November 23rd, Northwestern, and then you finish the season at Ohio State. Everybody always is tuned into that game. 3 years in a row have taken down Ohio State, looking for number 4. Mason, this is a tough schedule. This is the toughest Michigan schedule that I've seen in a long, long time. Toughest I can remember. Texas coming to town. I feel like that's going to be a pretty tough game, Mason. Now, with that being said, Texas doesn't have near the defensive line that they had last year. So I will say that, that's going to make it a little bit easier on this Michigan offensive line. But the plan has got to be run the football, eat clock, play good defense, don't give up any big plays, which is going to be tough to do against this Texas offense that's loaded at the wide receiver position, Mason. They're loaded pretty much everywhere on offense. That's going to be a tough one to win. I like Michigan against USC. USC struggles, with physical football teams. I mean, we all know that. Michigan is going to be the most physical team on the field that day, no doubt in my mind. Um, so I like that game. I like Minnesota, Arkansas State, Fresno State. Those are obviously wins in my opinion. So and then at Washington, Washington's going to be a little bit down this year, folks. They lost a lot, obviously, including their head coach. They're going to be down a bit this year. So out of those 6 games, Mason, I think this team ends up 5-1. I think that game against Texas is a loss, but I think you can win all these other games there in the first 6, and then those last 6 there, you'll have a rivalry game against Michigan State. Michigan State's going to be better, but they're not going to be a finished product this year. Not a team that anybody's really considering to be in the upper echelon of the Big Ten. Um, so I think you'll get a dub there in a good rivalry game. And then you got Oregon coming to town. Mason, I think Oregon's one of the top 3 teams in the country right now. And I think as of right now, Michigan could be a whole different team by the time this game comes around in November. So wouldn't surprise me if we didn't see Michigan, kind of hit their stride by this point in the season. Maybe Alex Orji is doing well in this offense as the starting quarterback at this point. But I like Oregon in that game. And the last game of the season at Ohio State. I'm going to have to lean Ohio State, Mason. Ohio State. Look, I know what this game has been like over the last few years. I know what as Michigan fans will call him, crying Ryan Day. I know what they're going to say the weaknesses are for that team. They don't know how to be physical like Michigan does, and I've heard it all. I know, but this Ohio State team could very well be the best team in the country this year. In my opinion, they're number 1 right now in my eyes for the 2024 season. We'll have to see how things develop, but I think a 9-3 season is, in my eyes, what is most probable for this Michigan Wolverines team. Take us through what your thoughts are on the schedule, and we'll wrap it up, man. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of nailed it there. This is a really tough schedule for Michigan, which we haven't seen in a long time. But Michigan has an opportunity to win every single game on this schedule. With the defense that they have, they're going to be in it with every single team that they face. When I look at the 3 big games that you mentioned, I feel really confident that this team is gonna win every other game, even including a national championship rematch against Washington. I think that they're gonna just not even sweat Washington or any other team. USC, I think, is going to be an easy win with this defense. But looking at starting with Texas, I looked at this game. I'm not very high on Texas this year, y'all. I think that they've got serious questions at DB and some questions up front on the defensive line. And I was thinking, like, man, maybe Michigan can kind of hold Texas to the low 20s, right? Maybe that's realistic to think this defense could play well enough that they could stay in the low 20s. But then I started thinking about it, and my concern is that the offense for Michigan is not going to be able to take advantage of that secondary with the passing attack. If they are, I think that Michigan probably wins this game. I mean, if they're able to put an offense on the field that has a strong passing attack by week 2, I think that's the big question: is are they going to be able to be that effective by week 2 to take advantage of this Texas defense? I don't know. And my concern is that the defense gets kind of hung out to dry. A lot of 3 and outs on offense, right? And it perpetuates into a situation where Texas is actually scoring in the 30s. And that's kind of my concern, is, the defense doesn't really get the complementary style of football that the offense needs it to in order to win that football game. But I do think it's going to be a close game. I've got to lean Texas at this point based on the matchups, right? Going down to Oregon, November 2nd. By this point, you expect some sort of passing attack to have developed. You expect some sort of identity on offense to have developed. But I think Oregon's just a more complete team overall. Oregon, we haven't done our breakdown on Oregon yet, but I can already tell you Oregon doesn't have any holes at any position on their team. So I've got to say that Oregon's going to come away with a win there, but definitely one that Michigan could win. I don't count them out in any game. And Ohio State's no different. You know, they're a team that is complete. I mean, you look at Ohio State, Oregon, and Georgia this year. I think are the most balanced, complete teams. You know, you do have questions at quarterback at Ohio State, which could be interesting if they're not able to pass the football in that game. With the DBs that we just talked about playing for Michigan, if they're sticky enough on those wide receivers and Ohio State's not able to run the football, we could be in for a slobber knocker. I tend to think that Ohio State's defense is going to be the best in the country. So I feel confident that Ohio State's going to be more productive against this Michigan defense than, Michigan's going to be able to take advantage of any holes in the Ohio State defense. So for that, I think that it's fair to lean Ohio State, especially with that game being played in the shoe this year, which Michigan's had some success in, but in recent years. But I think Ohio State comes away with the win this year, and Michigan, in my eyes, is a 9-3 team. Could end up dropping one somewhere that they shouldn't. Right? Maybe a USC it gets overlooked a little bit, but I think 9-3 is pretty fair. They could also win one that they shouldn't. So we'll see. But 9-3 is about where I'm at. I think that they're just outside of the playoffs by the end of the year, just outside of the Big Ten championship. But a really good team overall. Just a tough schedule.
If they can somehow sneak in a victory on one of those three really tough games, that could really throw a wrench in things in the Big Ten. You know, if you could somehow give Oregon a loss and so everybody kind of beat everybody, you know what I mean? To where maybe you clog up the system enough to where you end up in the Big Ten championship, or maybe you win 2 out of 3 of those games and you only have one loss. It's possible. It's all going to depend on this offense, though, Mason. And we got to see what this offense looks like without J.J. McCarthy and without a ton of that supporting cast from the national championship season last year. Congratulations again, Michigan fans. We're super, super excited for you. Winning a national championship after a long drought is something that us Georgia fans certainly know about. Our drought was much longer than yours. So we know all about it, and we've came close several times, just like you have throughout that drought. So it can be agonizing at times, but boy, it sure is worth the wait whenever you get that hardware and you pull the banner up there. Really, really good stuff. And it was what an interesting season it was last year. We hope that you'll consider hitting the subscribe button and joining us here on the First and Long College Football Show. I want to know in the comment section, how many wins is Michigan getting this year? Are they 8-win, 9-win, 10 wins? Are they winning all their games again? I want to hear what you have to say, Michigan fans or college football fans in general. I want to thank you for tuning in to the First and Long College Football Show, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you.